India-Russia bilateral relations. Whenever we think of India-Russia relations, certain ideas and principles comes to our mind. Unlike other bilateral relations, India-Russia relationship is consolidated and fermented by many factors. Many ideas, when we think of India-Russia relations, comes to our mind, like mutual trust, harmony, friendship, dependable ally, and to add a bigger objective, you can say strategic partners. Especially in the context of 21st century, the relationship between India and Russia is dynamic and evolving by nature. But can we say that it has suddenly come up? The base for India-Russia relations goes back to the erstwhile version of Russia, that is USSR. Or Soviet Union. It is true that when Soviet Union came into being by Russian Revolution of 1917, India's struggle for independence was going on. Soviet Union propagated communist ideology under broader umbrella of socialism, which was working for peasant and workers' welfare, in which there will be the rule of worker and peasants, that is the rule of proletariats. And this rule of proletariats will be completely opposite to the Western model of democracy or free market mechanism propagated by capitalism. faced by these two different ideologies and principles, naturally during Indian freedom struggle also, India would be more influenced by communist ideology, especially after the formation of USSR after 1970. There will be important interactions between many Indian leaders and Russian leaders, writers, painters, intellectuals, and so on. For example, Mahatma Gandhi was having good admiration and interaction with Leo Tolstoy. Similarly, Jawaharlal Nehru had been deeply inspired by the modernization and 5-year planning concept of Soviet Union, which went on to develop on modern lines, but in a different way from capitalism. Under these circumstances, there will be emergence of two blocks leading to beginning of Cold War between the two blocks of leadership, one under Soviet Union, other under America. It was in these circumstances India emerged as an independent nation, and that formed the basis of India-USSR relationship from the beginning. That is why, in order to appreciate present relationship between India and Russia, it have to be traced back to the times of USSR and India relations. One can say that the foundation and the basis laid down by USSR-India relations ultimately culminated into present day India-Russia relations. It is a unique relationship which has sustained and survived and thrived under different circumstances and conditions. That is why it is a unique in many aspects. India opted for policy of non-alignment from the beginning. That means not aligning or supporting any of the blocks, whether it is communist bloc under USSR or capitalist bloc under the US. India was not willing and ready to join any of the military alliances, but there was, and there obviously it happened that the position of India could be misunderstood under different circumstances. The Western powers would be thinking that India is and can be part of communist camp. It can be influenced by communist camp, or it can be influenced by USSR. And this non-alignment policy of India is actually a facade, and India is a supporter and part of bigger agenda of communism. Similarly, other view would be that USSR would be looking forward to India as an agent of Anglo-American imperialism. So one group is thinking India is part of bigger agenda of communism. Other group is thinking India is a tool or part of Anglo-American imperialism, because both the groups want to increase their influence. In such tough circumstances, India retained its own position, and that is why India sustained through also. But what differentiates India's relationship with USSR was the great support provided by the USSR in India's economic development. Unlike the US, USSR played fundamental role in India's core economic development, including the idea of 5-year plans. So the integrated economic development of India was facilitated by the support of USSR only. So whether it is heavy industries, training to workers, setting up of steel plant, power plants, hydel power plants or hydroelectric projects, higher education institutions like IITs, precision tools, and many dimensions of defense sector. USSR played a very important role in India's economic development. We do not find any such parallel example with any of the nation or group for that matter. So at the same time, when USSR is integral to India's economic development, Western countries under the US were following policy of non-cooperation with India. So the idea is to understand that on one hand, India is not part of any of the groups, but the basis for India-USSR relationship is laid down when India is allowed to have its own position on fundamental issues, but at the same time, USSR is coming forward for India's economic and strategic development, but such is not the case with the Western countries under the US, which is following a policy of not supporting India directly, or its support is tied with certain conditions. If US is willing to support India or even willing to export certain key commodities to India, then in return it wants a certain favor without any conditions. Such was not the case with USSR. That is what discriminates the relationship between India and USSR with that of other countries. That is why, in order to understand today's dynamic of India-Russia relationship, it can only be appreciated in the light of India-USSR relationship in the past, which started, as I said, after independence, because before independence also there have been good communication and relation between Indian leaders and the Russian, or you can say the USSR Soviet leaders. But the question arises that why USSR would be willing to support India in such circumstances. One probable answer is India being a large and a great developing country having a great future was a good asset for the USSR to spread its ideas to other Afro-Asian countries. Influence to other countries was possible through India. That is why there will be friendly cooperation between India and USSR, especially after 1953, when the period of Stalin ends and the next generation comes into picture. In the year 1955, when Jawaharlal Nehru visited Moscow, there was repeat visit, or you can say concurrent visit by the USSR leaders to India, which showcased that they were willing and they were going to give equal attention to India-USSR relationship. But the basis and foundation for India-USSR relationship can be gauged and depth can be seen from the stand taken by USSR on fundamental issues which were important for India. For example, the USSR stand on J&K was fundamentally aligned to the Indian stand on J&K, and unlike the United States, USSR and in the present times Russia stands by India and its stand and its policies on Jammu and Kashmir. Similarly, when India promoted concept of Panchsheel, it was also agreed upon and appreciated by the USSR. It laid down the future direction for India-Russia relationship. It was in these circumstances that there will be long-term government to government relationship, leading to emergence of strategic partnership between India and Russia. That is why, as I said, in order to understand India-Russia relationship, one has to appreciate, and insight goes into the times of India-USSR relations. When we talk about other aspects, then two key features which emerge as we discussed are trade relations and secondly defense relations. So both in terms of trade and commerce and also in terms of defense, a solid path was laid down between India and USSR relationship, which continued and which is continuing even till today and going to further strengths even in changed circumstances. Continued support was given by USSR to Indian industries, trade, and a novel and indigenous system was developed by both India and USSR, or for that you can say Russia, for doing or conducting business between both countries, because both the countries were facing foreign exchange scarcity in those times, as both the countries were not so much market aligned, or their economy was not very much open and aligned with the world markets. That is why they went on to have their own indigenous system of trade. Especially when it came to payments, they created rupee to ruble system, and a fundamental system was created for rupee to ruble exchange, so that both the countries can conduct their business without having any dependence upon, say for example, dollar or pound. It goes without saying that the world institutions were controlled and dominated by the Western powers. That is why Soviet Union and India went for such indigenous systems, and it really helped in creation of a great relationship between both countries for a long time, and you can say till the collapse or disintegration of Soviet Union. The rupee ruble system worked on the basis of the fact that Russia would be giving defense and other equipments to India, and in return India is also exporting commodities from tea to pharmaceuticals to chemicals to lot more commodities, and that's how the exchange was going on. An exchange rate was fixed between both the countries, and that's how payment was made. There had been issues. Yes, it became an important issue at the time of disintegration of Soviet Union, and it was one of the reasons how that defined actually India-Russia relationship in the 21st century. Similarly, we can say that it was in 1971 when Indo-Soviet Peace, Friendship and Cooperation Treaty was signed. It laid the basis for today's strategic and robust relationship. Soviet Union actively stood by India during the Bangladesh Liberation War. When US was trying to coerce India, it was trying to push and intimidate India, USSR was standing behind India in a firm manner. So in a way, as China and Pakistan bonhomie emerged and both became hostile with India, so in the longer run, USSR emerged as a solid rock for India-Russia relationship. And the fact that Russia never forced India to change its stand, or it never forced India, it never criticized India for its independence, foreign policy initiatives and ideas. So in that manner, India-Russia relationship is a true example of how two countries or two powers have conducted their relationship in an unparalleled manner. But as I said, by the time of disintegration of USSR, things were changing faster. India itself was going through many changes, and in early 1990s, when Russia emerged out of Soviet Union and continued relationship with India on the same lines, India was also seeing a great transition in terms of economic reforms. It was in this period of 1990s that two issues, one we are already discussing, that is rupee ruble system, and other was the issue of cryogenic engines. which defined India-Russia relationship. It went on to make it little unsteady in the beginning, but later on it has redefined itself. Definitely, defense relations between India and Russia are of paramount importance. Russia have been single most important unparalleled ally of India in defense sector from a long time to come. It has been a solid rock, and such relationship is also unparalleled in any of the bilateral relationship. So when we talk about cryogenic engines, so cryogenic engine dispute, I would say, when India was looking forward to import of cryogenic technology from Russia, there were hurdles created by the US in its import to India. India was looking forward to cryogenic technology, or you can say rocket propellant technology, when India was looking forward to sending satellites in geostationary orbit, because this engine and this technology is a very advanced technology which is a very heavy. It requires a lot of heavy input, and solid engines are there, heavy engines are there. Access to this technology is not so easy. That is why ISRO was looking forward to import of this technology from Glev Cosmos, that is the Russian counterpart, so that India can send its satellite in space for weather forecasting, remote sensing, telecommunication and other peaceful purposes. So this technology, or you can say this liquid engine propellant technology, which India was looking forward to from Russia, it became a huge issue between both countries because of the intervention of the US, which claimed that Russia cannot give this technology to India because it violates MTCR regime, Missile Technology Control Regime. As India have not been signatory to either non-proliferation treaty or it has not been signatory to comprehensive test ban treaty, India had already conducted nuclear test, and India was looking forward to another nuclear test which took place in the late 1990s. Therefore, the US was of the view that India have the potential to misuse cryogenic technology, which in today's times we have developed on our own, and we are a robust power. Our resilience have paid off. This technology in those times was not given to India at the insistence of US, in spite of lot of pleadings and lot of requests by both India and Russia. So it was a setback for India-Russia relations at that time. As I said, later on India went on to develop this technology. India have been a great power. It has been sending many missions, including Chandrayaan, Mission Mangal and so on. But then at that time, this was an important issue which defined India-Russia relationship. Similarly, the issue of rupee and ruble also becomes important, because with disintegration of USSR, there was changed trade dynamics. And secondly, the system that India and USSR were using, it was also at odds with the world market system. And third point, the exchange rate. For example, if we say 1 rupee is equal to certain ruble in 1970s, then it went on to change till 1990s. And such was the change that India accumulated crores of debt. India accumulated crores of debt which it is supposed to pay to Russia because of its trade and you can say export and imports. The major import of India was in defense sector. India's army, Indian Air Force and Navy, it will not be exaggeration to say, was completely dependent on Russian hardware, and Russia greatly facilitated and supported whatever kind of modernization you can say of Indian defense sector. It helped in institutionalization of Indian defense sector and many institutions. So it is in this context India accumulated huge debt of Russia which India was obliged to pay back. But the problem was that how India should pay back that debt which it has accumulated. It became the second roadblock between India-Russia relationship in the early, or you can say the last decade of the 20th century, which also filtered into the first decade of 21st century. However, both countries, they went on to rise above, I should say, narrow factors and went on to diversify the relationship to new areas on a broader plane. So there are areas of convergence between India and Russia relationship. When we say areas of convergence, then already as we have said, there have been common position of Russia on many of the issues in which India is also having the same position. For example, on the issue of international terrorism. When we say international terrorism, then it automatically means that any form or any kind of terror activities is condemned by both Russia and India in all circumstances. India and Russia are of the view, and they have bilateral cooperation in combating terrorism. That no kind of terrorism must be promoted, supported or justified under any circumstances. Both countries are of the view that terrorism and all related issues must be tackled under the multilateral umbrella of the United Nations system. They are of the view that in order to combat terrorism, whether it is sponsor, whether it is perpetrator, whether it is patron, whether it is financing, all and each kind of linkages to terrorism must be taken into account. Like India, which have been suffering from terror issues from a long time, similarly Russia have been also facing the issue of terrorism in its different region, for example Chechnya. So like the way India is having J&K, similarly Russia is having Chechnya region. Like the way there is an element and an idea that Kashmiris must get self-determination, similarly is the demand for Chechen region also. And both India and Russia are of the view that any kind of radicalism or fundamentalist ideas which lead to terror activities must not be given shelter or justified. Both the countries have suffered from third country intervention which have supported terrorism in moral, financial, ideological or support by government. That is why it showcases a unique relationship between India and Russia which is time tested and it cannot be altered under any circumstances. For example, after Mumbai attack, India and Russia, they converged their relationship on a higher platform. Russia provided more legitimacy and support to India when India asked for that it has got right to bring justice to those who are promoting and conducting terrorism on Indian soil in Indian courts also. India has right and it was supported by Russia in this regard. Similarly, when India went on to conduct its foreign policy and also self-interest or national interest, when it came to conducting surgical strike or conducting attacks on terror zones in neighboring country, Russia stood by India and it was a deep-rooted sign of time-tested relationship. So unlike US, India-Russia relationship, it has fermented and developed on a very, very broad platform in which security, national interest, cultural and civilizational ties play very, very important role. Therefore, the joint declaration of both the countries and renewing of partnership, the Treaty of Friendship, which was first signed in 1971 and renewed after the disintegration of USSR, it has been an uninterrupted process. With no other country, no other parallel is seen in the world where such dynamic relationship, that too on a broad-based canvas, is seen. Here it is not the question of only narrow vested interests of both India and Russia, but a deep relationship which promotes a multipolar order. The Russian interest lies in the fact that it wants to retain its relevance in the world as an important power, and India is an important leverage in that factor without undermining interest of both the parties or of Asia or for that matter of the whole world. That is why, as I said, the India-Russia relationship is seen from different dimensions, as we have discussed, whether you can see defense relations, whether you can see on the common platform and issues, or for that matter even the idea of United Nations reforms. When it comes to UN reforms, Russia has stood by India, which is demanding that India must get permanent place in United Nations Security Council with veto power. Russia itself is having veto power and it has not held back its support for India. Similarly, Russia have been an ardent supporter of India that it must be part of nuclear supplier group also. So it is in this regard, whether it is the issue of global dimension or whether it is the issue of regional dimension, India and Russia, they have converged their mutual understanding so as to take their relationship to new heights. It was on this basis that both the countries are having similar outlook on many global issues. So apart from terrorism, issues like Israel-Palestine conflict or Arab-Israel conflict, we should say, both Russia and India, they are having more or less similar standing. India also wants that Palestine as a state must get its due, and India has dehyphenated its relationship with Israel and with that of Palestine. So India has not given up on the cause of Palestine, but then India have also not compromised on its sustained and strategic relationship with Israel. Similarly, on Iran nuclear issue, both Russia and India are of the view that it must be solved peacefully and Iran must be given right, it has a right to develop peaceful nuclear energy for civilian purposes. So both are converging on this also. On the issue of climate change, or whether it is issue of newer emerging issues like plastic pollution, both the countries have same kind of view, which showcases that their relationship is going to sustain for a long time to come. Another very important area of cooperation is nuclear energy. India-Russia relationship sustained sanctions by the Western powers when India conducted its nuclear test in 1998. And Russia is one of the first countries which came up to support India in both direct and indirect manner, even at a time when rest of the world was not ready to support India for civil nuclear energy. Yes, Indo-US nuclear deal created a kind of a setback for India-Russia nuclear cooperation, but it was very temporary because of the deeper understanding and great convergence of ideas, giving space to each other's concerns. Russia is one of the largest contributor to nuclear power energy in India. It is building many nuclear reactors and obviously exporting technology to India. We have to understand that India is not yet member of nuclear supplier group. Still also it has been supporting India in order to get clean fuel so as to meet its challenge of not only development but also to safeguard environment. Even in third countries, both the countries are coming together to support nuclear power development. This is the key example how India-Russia relationship has sustained. And when we talk about future, then India's mission to moon and also India's mission to send man in space, manned mission in space, Russia is a very crucial partner. Training is already going on, and there have been institutions involved on the both sides which have been collaborating with each other in a very, very comprehensive manner. It was all on these bases that the strategic partnership developed between both the countries. And that is how strategic partnership resulted into continued interaction and also summits between both the countries on a regular basis, when the Russian Premier will be visiting India and the Indian Premier will also be visiting Russia. It is a very, very great example of how both these countries have acted for each other and with each other in different circumstances. So the strategic partnership, which obviously involved defense cooperation, goes back to the time when Russia was the only key exporter of defense equipments and armaments to India. Only key exporter. So from the time period of only key exporter, Russia became one of the largest exporter of defense equipments to India, but the relationship sustained. In the changed circumstances in the 21st century, India went on to not only indigenize its defense sector, but it is also looking forward to non-conventional weapons. So, in order to tackle the change dynamics and hostile China and Pakistan, India went on to diversify its basket and to accelerate the process of defense cooperation with different countries, for example Israel and the US, but it did not make any dent into India-Russia sustained relationship. India is still looking forward to anti-missile systems like S-400 from Russia. BrahMos missile, taking its name from Moskova River and Brahmaputra River, is an excellent example of perennial deep relationship. Similarly, the aging fleet of Indian fighter aircrafts, it is being replaced by different set of aircrafts, but then we have got excellent support from Russia in terms of maintenance, in terms of replacement, in terms of having technology in India only, so that we can handle issues on our own. Similarly is an example of Sukhoi, and similarly the example of great Indian naval power. Indian submarine nuclear power and naval ships, they are integrally linked with the support of Russia. So idea of India-Russia cooperation is not to have a detrimental impact on any of the countries of world, whether it is China or it is not directly linked with Pakistan, but it has got a much more deeper and complex phenomena. Russia's location and its perennial relations with the Western world, which have been hot and cold. Russia also needs an ally which is always standing behind it in different circumstances. And there is no country better than India in that regard. India is also a net energy security importer from Russia. That is why another factor makes Russia a dependable ally and partner. India and Indian countries have been investing into Russian Far East areas, whether it is ONGC or Indian Oil Corporation. There have been many PSUs and private sector bodies in both the countries. They have been involving with each other so as to take deeper engagement. But all these developments, they have to be seen from the context of the developing dynamics in India's neighborhood, that is of Pakistan and China, and that is why India has sustained and retained same charm with Russia even when Russia-China relationship have improved, and same is the case with Russia-Pakistan relations. Till disintegration of USSR, there was a very, very less chance of any kind of Pakistan-Russia relationship because of the engagement of the US and its vested interest, and a great arm and aid support to Pakistan by the US. But in the changed circumstances, one key element which forces Russia to have realignment of its foreign policy initiatives with Pakistan is Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a key territory and a very, very strategic asset for not only Asia but the whole world. That is why at a time when US was sponsoring insurgency in a way in Afghanistan with support of Pakistan, Russia was always sure what is happening there. But now, with the emergence of Taliban, Russia also need to secure its borders, and also it need to take back its area of influence which has been there since long time. That is why it has been keeping a kind of a link with Pakistan also. Russia is an integral player, and any kind of peace in Afghanistan on a sustainable basis is going to make more prosperity and also stability in the whole region. That is why even if at a time we say Pakistan and Russian forces are doing joint exercises, it is not a kind of a threat for India. Or when we say that the border dispute between China and Russia which get minimized or which get resolved, and at the same time China-Russia bonhomie becomes higher, then at the same time India and USSR-Russia relations cannot be bring into question. Because the fact that the long-term sustained defense relationship and the trust that India and Russia have gained with each other, same cannot be replicated in case of China-Russia relations. And obviously Pakistan is out of question. Whenever Russia have supplied defense equipments including armaments to China, China have been at forefront of doing reverse engineering without any kind of explicit trust and support of Russia. And it has created its own versions, but it has never been the case with India. That brings into question the fundamentals and also determining factors of Indian foreign policy, which are obviously trust, harmony, peace, global brotherhood, and also mutual prosperity. Because these are the key bases for Indian foreign policy and relations, it has sustained and retained and nourished India-Russia relations, which is not the case with either Pakistan or either with China. But in the changed dynamic circumstances, even if Russia, Pakistan and China bonhomie comes at one platform, India have been also moving forward of diversifying its factors. India is part of many multilateral platforms like Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India along with Russia welcomed inclusion of Afghanistan into SAARC. India is member of Indian Ocean Rim Association. India is investing its energy and time into maritime security. When Russia is looking forward to Arctic, then India is already there in terms of research and scientific investigations. India is one of the few countries which is already present and looking forward to a kind of a sustainable benefit. So whether it is space, when India becomes one of the few countries to have anti-satellite power to destroy any satellite in space which is directed at India, then India is not going to misuse any of the powers. Then Russia understands at the same time that India is a growing global power which will definitely get its due position in the time to come. So any kind of negativity, any kind of hyper-nationalism, any kind of fundamentalism, any kind of narrow national interest are not part of India's foreign policy or relations. That is why Russia is sure India will be able to tackle both China and Pakistan, and that is why even if Russia is going to support Pakistan and China in different circumstances, it cannot undermine position, prestige and also existence of India. That is why when Russia is conducting more warm relations with Pakistan, then India is always informed of the view, and India appreciates and obviously takes into account that in the changed circumstances of the 21st century, it is very important for any country to diversify and to develop its relations at different pace and different level. It is in these circumstances that the two different areas, as we have already discussed, one is trade and commerce, other is defense. These are the two arms of India-Russia relationship. It is in these two areas, that is economic exploration and also defense ties, that India and Russia are moving forward. India is also looking forward to diversify its basket of trade with Russia, and that is why Indian Prime Minister, when visited the Far East region, it went on to request and also accepted Russian proposal of more investment by Indian companies, of more manpower by India into that region, and being a partner for exploration of those areas for mineral and other kind of wealth, so that both the countries can mutually prosper and also develop in a long time to come. However, when we say India-Russia relations, then in the same light we cannot talk about all Central Asian nations. That is why India need to and is working upon developing its relationship with other Central Asian nations in a different plane and a different level, at individual level, not just, it is not in the sweeping light of India-Russia relations. So the critical aspect from the Russian point of view is India's engagement with different Central Asian nations. For example, India having treaty on import of uranium, India having military ties with Central Asian nations, India having great cooperation with Iran on Chahabar port, India having a deeper tie with Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. So in spite of deeper engagement with these countries, there is less impact on India-Russia relations. That is why, as we have said in the beginning, that India-Russia relationship goes back to the times of Soviet Union. So it is the Soviet Union which has nourished and created a big banyan tree of India-Russia relations. It is not just Bollywood, but also great civilizational ties which have defined India-Russian relations from a long, long time. But the coming decades of 21st century, which is facing issues of climate change, terrorism, nuclear powers, that is non-proliferation of nuclear power, India emerging as a global power, changing dynamics of warfare, and the rise of China, apart from flexing of muscles by the US, and India as a net energy importer, having great key assets in terms of IT and textiles, apart from a great human resource power, and most importantly a great market, will define how India and Russia will conduct their relations. It is on these factors, apart from other factors obviously, the relation between India and Russia will be defined and decided. But it goes without saying that India-Russia relationship is a time-tested relationship which has seen ups and downs like two members of a family, but both are having their own independent views, both are dependent on themselves, both are working for betterment of each other and for their own national interest under all circumstances. So with this, we can say India-Russia relations are perennial relations and they justify themselves in the changed circumstances. Both are working for multilateral world order. None of them is interested in a unipolar world order led by the US, and there is obviously genuine interest of both countries being fulfilled by cooperating and coordinating with each other under different circumstances. So with this, we wind up our interaction and discussion on India-Russia relations.